global warming real? Is climate change irreversible? Why are carbon emissions still rising? Join host Dr. Alberto Troccoli, a global leader in climate science and its application to the energy sector, as he unpacks these pressing issues. Through candid conversations with leading experts, get ready to demystify climate change and explore its many layers. So, let's Climunicate!
Hello and welcome to this episode of Let's Climunicate. I'm very glad to be here. We're actually at the resort, it's a commercial center in Italy, near Padua, where the International Conference on Energy Meteorology is being held. And we're here with Debra Lew. I'm very pleased to be here with the director of ESIC, the Energy System Integration Group based in US. And it's a pleasure to have you in this podcast.
Thank you so much, Alberto. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy to be part of this conference.
Excellent. So we want to have this episode is going to be a bit short because we are also pressed with time with all the other things happening in the conference. But we do really want to hear your view because you have so much experience in the power sector and it's so important now, this debate of climate change. So we normally start by asking you a little bit about your background, and then we go into some questions related to the climate change and power sector. So if you can tell us a bit your interest in the power sector, what you did as your studies. And
Sure. So, first I should just mention the organization I work for, the Energy Systems Integration Group. We're a nonprofit educational organization. We bring together industry to try to solve technical challenges to decarbonization of energy systems. And my background is in electrical engineering and in physics. My PhD is in applied physics. And I spent a lot of time at the United States Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And there I worked on power system studies of how to integrate wind and solar into the power system. I worked there for about 16 years. I also worked at General Electric, GE, which is the United States' largest maker of wind turbines. And while I was there, I also worked quite a lot on distributed energy resources. Now at ESIC, I get to work globally with many different people, from system operators at utilities to meteorologists to developers of wind and solar to people working on electric vehicles. So I feel very lucky to be able to do that.
That's great. So we have a tradition in this podcast to ask 4 quickfire questions.
Oh, sure.
And hope it's fine for you. We ask you just to be brief in the answers. This is really just to understand where you stand in this issue of climate change. We want to talk with everybody, but it's also good to have a kind of reference at the start. And that's why we ask the same questions to everybody. And so the first one is, in the last 150 years, what's your knowledge of the temperature change for the globe? How much has it changed?
Right. So last year was the hottest year on record. So in 2024, the average temperature was 1.55 Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. And we're very concerned because the global climate at about 1.5 degrees Celsius can lead to pretty drastic consequences for all of us.
Okay. And then out of this increase, so you said that there is an increase in temperature. How much of this do you think is due to human causes, like emissions from humans?
Right. So most of that is due to human emissions causes. So energy is a really big piece of this. And our use of fossil fuels, both for electricity and for transportation, as well as heating of buildings and industrial uses, is the main culprit for this problem.
Okay. And looking forward now, in the next 80 years, normally we look at 2100, let's say. How much do you think the temperature is going to change still?
Oh, I am scared. I am very scared. But my hope is that we are going to pull together as a globe to really attack this problem in a very serious way, more than we have done so in the past, and that we can help to at least stabilize things so that we're not continuing to increase global average temperatures. My hope is that we are going to be able to stabilize things, and then we are also, I hope, with technology like direct air capture and carbon capture and sequestration, going to be able to help reverse some of these changes. This is my hope for my grandchildren.
That's great. And just lastly, very quickly, also, if we can address this other question, which is a little trickier, but we just want to have your impression about what you know of tipping points. So the tipping points in the Earth system, like glaciers.
Sure. I mean, here in Europe, which I have been very lucky to be able to come to from the United States, one of the big tipping points is that current that comes up from the Gulf up, this current that comes up to help keep Europe warm. This is one of the key tipping points that I imagine you all must be very concerned about. And then, of course, the tipping points with large glaciers, with ice melt. I think that is something that we are all concerned about. I come from Colorado, which is up in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains, in the United States. And we are all very concerned about these large glaciers also, melting.
Okay, so now we go more into your domain of expertise on the power sector. And the first question would be, what in your decades of work, a long experience, as you said, what do you think is the major shift? What has surprised you the most in the industry in the last 10, 20 years?
Sure. So I started focusing on power systems, say, in the mid-2000s. In the mid-2000s, what we were mostly concerned about was what was the most wind and solar you could put onto a power system before you would have reliability problems. And they thought maybe it was 10%. They thought, hey, at 10%, that's the most you can do, and then you're going to have issues. And so we did studies back then to try and show that we could simulate the power system and show that we could do 20% or 30%. A big study I worked on, the Western Wind and Solar Integration Study, looked at 35%. And people then they would laugh because they didn't think it was possible. Now, in the 2010s, we had states like Hawaii and California and companies, utilities like Excel, voluntarily adopting targets of 100% clean energy. And then it was a completely different dynamic, because before we were trying to push the industry, and now industry was pushing us as engineers to figure out the solutions to make 100% clean energy systems, because we didn't have the solutions readily available. And so it was a completely different shift in how to think and work and what we were working on. That's been the most surprising, but in a good way. I'm very happy about that. I'd rather try to solve a problem than try to show people that, yes, this can be done. It's been done in other places.
So you sound very optimistic about the level of renewable energy in the grid, and yet there are many people who debate the fact that, there are many issues when it comes to having more than a certain amount, that 20, 30%, because there's grid instability. You don't have enough inertia in the system and all these things. So what do you think are you seem to say that it's actually possible to reach very high levels. What are the key enablers to reach this level? And what can we say to people that, said this is not possible? I mean, what are the key levers that we can play with?
Sure. So there's three main challenges. First, you have the balancing challenge. So, when the sun sets or when there's a large wind ramp down, how are you going to balance the system? Because the system must always have balance in supply and demand every moment. So for that challenge, we need to look for flexibility in the system. So that's making sure you have flexibility from all of your thermal plants and your hydro plants and other power plants that are online. And also means we need to have maybe more transmission, because the better we link many regions together, we can link the geographic diversity. So when the wind is ramping down here, maybe it's ramping up somewhere else. We also need to worry about things like demand flexibility and how do we incentivize consumers to be more flexible in their use. So that's the balancing challenge. And then storage, of course, is another huge answer to that, but that costs money. So that's the balancing challenge. Then we have the resource adequacy challenge. So making sure you have adequate supply for every moment, to some high level of reliability. In the US, our level of reliability is 1 day in 10 years. And making sure you have adequate supply becomes more important as you have very high levels of wind and solar on the system, because you may need to have long duration storage. You certainly need, someone on a short duration storage, especially with the solar shape. But long duration storage becomes important for they call it a Dunkelflaute event, where there's low amounts of wind and solar. And then the third challenge is the challenge of stability. So what took down, for example, Spain and Portugal just last month? It was some kind of stability challenge. We still don't know exactly what, but there are a couple things that feed into this. One piece is inertia and frequency response. The other piece is voltage stability from the system not being as strong synchronously, because we've got a different kind of generator online. It's an inverter, power electronics, instead of a rotating machine. And so those two things we can mitigate against. We have new technologies like grid forming inverters that we are starting to deploy, but we need to work faster on these technologies and the studies.
So you named some challenges, but from what I understand, you hinted at also some of the solutions. So what can we say to our listeners to be sure that this is being tackled, and there are things that are going to happen so that we can increase the amount of renewables? Or are we going to hit more and more problems like in Spain?
So it depends on how fast industry can move to do the studies, to put into place standards, and to deploy new technologies. So the stability issues, I believe we can solve these. These are power engineering problems that engineers can solve. And likely it will be through a judicious use of this new grid forming technology. But exactly, how much needs to be grid forming, and where do you need to deploy this? Or perhaps you need some synchronous condensers that mimic conventional generators. Where should those be, and how much of that do you need? We need to do a lot of studies to figure that out. My hope is that we can do this fast before we had another event. Again, we don't know what caused the event in Spain and Portugal.
It might not have been.
It might not have been renewables. It might have been. We have no idea until the report comes out. But we do know that we need to do these studies and analysis and figure this out, and that we can do this.
So eventually, what do you see as a limit? I mean, do you see a limit in the number, or the percentage of wind and solar, which are the more variable sources of renewables, into the grid, or is there a theoretical limit, or could we achieve in principle 100%? I mean, again, this is in the debate of, people saying, it's hard to integrate 2030. Why should we go higher?
Right. Well, so first of all, we know that we can go higher because we know if we look at Denmark, for example, I think they must be at least at 60%, 60% wind and solar. So we know that we can go much higher anyway. But is there a hard limit? So I don't believe there is a hard limit, but you have to pair wind and solar with storage. And again, batteries are one piece of that, but they're not enough. Batteries aren't going to get you all the way there. And if you try to do it with just batteries, wind and solar, studies show it becomes very expensive, extremely expensive. So what you would do instead...
Sorry, this is also in spite of the strong decrease in price of batteries, yes?
Right, even with a strong degree, just because a 4-hour battery isn't long enough for one of these Dunkelflaute events where you have low amounts of wind and solar. So what most studies, at least in the United States, are looking at is use of things like hydrogen or some other kind of long duration storage. Also, another could be that you use gas and you have carbon capture and sequestration. Another could be biomass, bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration can be even better. It acts as a negative emissions resource. So it helps to sink emissions rather than emit them or contain them. So there are a lot of different options. The thing is, we don't know which one's going to win. So until we know,
but at least we have many options apparently. So from what you say, so it's a very probably exciting area to be in.
Right, and I forgot to mention nuclear. So nuclear is another potential option, and small modular reactors are one, potentially promising one that we're working on.
Although currently there's no small modular
right, there
operating.
Is not. But I will also say that we have nuclear submarines, which are
small
nuclear reactors. So we do have something to come from to work towards that could show some promise.
That's good. So it's it's very good to have your perspective on although pretty short, but you did a very good job at synthesizing and providing key pointers and for this complex aspect of grid integration, increase of renewables. And it's been a pleasure to have you here on the podcast, Debbie, and we'll look forward to your interventions at the conference later in the week.
Oh, thank you so much, Alberto, for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about this with you.
If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to explore our other interviews and subscribe to our channel to receive notifications about future episodes.